Thinking of the happy, luminescent city of Tokyo makes it really difficult to believe that just 68 miles away from the capital lies Aokigahara, or better known by its nickname, Suicide Forest. A place not only said to see over 100 suicides per year, but which is also supposedly haunted by both ghosts and demons. However, these ghosts seem to be for more than just those who decide to take their lives amongst the sea of trees. In fact, its dark past goes much farther. And I think that to truly understand the supernatural occurrences in Aokigahara, we have to go back to the past and the crazy things that have since happened there. But fair warning, you'll want to stick around because the true accounts from people who have visited the forest are at the end, and they are worth the wait. So, are you ready? Then take my hand, hold it tight, and let's walk into the darkness together. In 1864 CE, Mount Fuji had a major eruption on the east side of the volcano, spewing out loads of lava, rock, and volcanic ash for 10 full days, leaving many dead and destroying everything in the lava's path. Some of that lava actually flowed straight through the center of a nearby lake, cutting it in half and creating a 12-mile area of hardened lava between it. Through the years, that 12-mile area grew into a full-blown forest full of tall trees, which was named Aokigahara. So, the forest actually starts off being created by a violent and very deadly act of nature, and things only get worse. In 1340, there was a Buddhist monk named Shokai, I may or may not be pronouncing that correctly, who went into one of the caves inside of the forest and began a ritual where he basically starved himself to death. He believed that by doing this, he could liberate people of their karmic transgressions. He actually wasn't the only monk to use the forest for rituals that ended in suicide either. A lot of others have actually gone into the forest with the full intention of never coming back out. They did this hoping that their sacrifice would benefit the world in some way, shape, or form, and for hundreds of years they have continued to do so now and then, most often with a ritual called Sokushinbutsu, where the monks starve themselves and eat nothing but leaves, tree bark, and rocks. They are later buried alive while they meditate, the goal being to mummify themselves naturally and reach nirvana. But that's a whole other video. Let's get back to our main story. Now, during the Warring States period of 1967 through 1603, famine took over the land. The war depleted many of the sources for food and money, so a lot of the Japanese families felt that they had to choose between feeding the family members who were young, strong, and could contribute to the household, or having a whole family starve to death. And so they chose the first option. Anyone who was too young, too sick, or too old to be found useful to the household would be chosen to be sacrificed for the good of the family. A strong and able member of the household who could make the journey would strap them to their backs and carry them all the way into the forest and then return home without them, leaving the poor soul to starve and fend for themselves in a forest full of wildlife, including Asian black bears. These people who were left behind are said to be some of the spirits that haunt Aokigahara, most in the shape of Yurei, a malevolent Japanese spirit that can be seen depicted in horror movies like The Grudge or The Ring. In fact, this is where most of the superstition surrounding the forest has come from. There are rumors that these spirits not only haunt this forest, but also somehow draw the living into the forest, where they then become hopeless, depressed, and in some stories even possessed, and take their own lives, their spirits joining the hundreds that already roam Aokigahara. Now, although Aokigahara is a beautiful forest, open to the public for hiking and tourism, especially along the western edge, which is home to several caves, the hiking paths are full of signs put up by the government begging those who are thinking of taking their lives to reconsider, reminding them that their life is a gift, and telling them to think of their parents and children. That's because since the 1960s, people have gradually been growing the number of suicides in the forest per year. In 2003, there were 105 bodies found throughout the forest. In 2010, there were 54 confirmed suicides, but also a whopping 200 attempts. Keep in mind that these numbers are only the bodies they find. Many of the bodies are found by rangers or tourists years after they have passed away. There has actually been an annual body search conducted by the police with the help of journalists and volunteers that began in 1970 and is still being done today. The poor rangers who randomly come across the bodies as they work have to retrieve the body, usually having to cut them down, since one of the most popular forms of suicide within the forest is hanging. They then load them in their vehicle and drive it back to the ranger station and place it in a special room that they have built with 2 beds. Yes, 2. Because the spirits of the forest are believed to be Ilore, they follow the Japanese tradition of having someone stay in the room with the body all night regardless of the level of decomposition. Otherwise, they risk the body wailing in pain throughout the night, or even have it come to life and make its way to the ranger's sleeping quarters. Now, if you leave the hiking paths, which some tourists do a lot of times, you'll come across artifacts of the departed such as clothing, packs, food, tents, and wallets. Sometimes you'll find suicide notes or upside-down dolls that have been nailed to a tree. The upside-down dolls usually signify the person placed a curse upon this cruel world which wronged them right before they left it. In rare occasions, when the rangers have missed specific areas during their searches, you may even find the body yourself, or pieces of one. Some people claim to have seen or heard someone who has led them to a corpse who looked very much like the person who led them there. Once the body is found, however, the person or voice that led them there has vanished and is nowhere to be found. Those who do leave the path need to be very careful, though. Aokigahara is not only a danger because of the spirits that inhabit it, and not all who never come out of it had plans to commit suicide. Because of the porous volcanic ground, the sounds of the forest are easily absorbed, and it's said that you cannot hear birds, leaves rustling, or even the sound of the road once you walk 30 feet in. If you get lost or injured, search parties will find it extremely difficult to find you through the silence, and both can happen very easily. The floor is full of holes and large roots that are covered by years of decomposed leaves and moss, which make it hard to know where the holes are. Falling and injuring yourself while scared or distracted can easily happen. There is also a rumor that those who leave the path mostly get lost because the markers that they leave on the trees to find their way back have been somehow untied, or the string that they had tied to a tree and had been planning to follow to get back into the path is cut by some unknown person or thing, and they're left to find their way back through the sea of almost identical trees on their own. Now, as I said before, a lot of people do swear that the spirits of Aokigahara possess people. A Reddit user who has since deleted their account posted a very interesting first account on this. He said that he and his 2 friends had a childhood dream of visiting Japan, and when they finally got the chance as adults, his friend Adam told him about Aokigahara, and since he was a fan of the supernatural, he was really excited to check it out. He says that they waited until dark and began hiking the trails. About 3 miles in, they left the path and were lost. Another 3 miles later, he heard his friend Adam yell, "Check this out!" He says, "When John and I got there, we found Adam staring into the blackness of the night. To the right of him was a bundle of pictures, a man and what seemed to be his girlfriend. Her face was blacked out with a marker, with letters on it that said, 'Come back.'" He does write this phrase, "come back," in Japanese on Reddit, and then translates it for us. So yes, on the pictures it was written in Japanese. He continues, saying that Adam looked at him with a pale face and black eyes as he told him about the Yurei and how they haunt the forest. He asked Adam what he had seen, but Adam just looked at them and told them to continue on. He says, John and I knew something was wrong with Adam. His neck kept on twitching, and he wouldn't stop making a motion with his hand like he was banging on something. He says that he asked Adam where he was going, but that Adam had begun to speak a different language. He and his other friend John looked at each other for a brief moment, and when they looked back, Adam was gone. He says that John and I ran looking for him. Adam, Adam! Moments later, we heard what sounded like voices. A man and a woman arguing. Then what sounded like a loud bang. Did he kill her? John started to mutter something. A forest for the Yurei. A forest for the Yurei. A forest for the Yurei. I yelled to John, John, snap out of it. He gasped and looked at me. He began to cry. I asked him what's wrong. He pulled out the pictures of the couple we found earlier. I took 2 steps back and stared at him with blank eyes. He wouldn't stop crying. He fell to his knees and gazed into my eyes, and then began to scream, Come back! Come back! Come back! Then everything got so blurry. I just passed out and woke up in a hospital. Some Japanese university students found me lying on the ground. They found Adam hanging in a tree with "Come back" engraved on the trunk of the tree. John was later found dead by the tree he found the pictures, both pronounced as suicides. The pictures were never found. This is one of many stories that claim that the spirits of the forest possess others, but even those who aren't possessed have stories claiming to have seen spirits. Many claim to have seen one or more white figures drifting through the trees, or hear unnatural screams that do not sound human and leave you wondering how the forest seems to be draped in a blanket of silence, but these screams can easily pierce through it. Junji Inagawa, a Japanese actor, TV commentator, and urban legend researcher, has had plenty of experiences in the forest. The following account was told to me by a third party, but came from the many documented experiences that Junji has had there. Junji, along with other cast and crew from an upcoming movie that was set to film in Aokigahara, were at the scene and had just finished filming successfully the first part of a scene. Everyone was busy preparing for the second filming as they waited for 2 comedian actors who had not yet arrived on set and who were set to take part in the second filming. They were expected a bit late, however, so this wasn't an issue. Eventually, a taxi arrived at the set, and one of the women working in it, who was in charge of these things, approached it. The woman, seeing that no one got out of the car, knocked on the window and asked the driver for the receipt so that she could pay him. When there was no response, she banged on it, asking if the man could hear her, and that's when she really began to look at the driver. She realized that the man was frozen in terror. At this point, a small group of the cast and crew started to surround the taxi, and after calling the driver and actors a few times, they all began to slowly react and snap out of it. They stepped out of the car, still trembling from terror. Once they began to recover their wits, they started to explain what happened to them that had left them in that position. The actors had arrived from another job by train and had hailed the taxi, shown the driver a fax with the address they needed to get to, and once the driver had confirmed that he knew the area and could get them there, they hopped into the car and were off. At first, the ride went by fast. The 3 men talked and joked around. Eventually, though, the 2 actors began to feel tired from a long day of work and travel, and the movement of the car combined with the darkness of a rural area at midnight put them both to sleep. Suddenly, they were jarred awake by a violent movement of the car. They immediately looked around them and realized that the car was now driving through the actual forest on a narrow dirt road. The actors asked the driver if there was something wrong, and the driver expressed how he thought they were going the right way, but on the wrong road. After driving a little farther down the road, the car's headlights caught what looked like the roof of another vehicle in the distance. They all agreed that they should ask the other car's driver for directions and make sure that they're on the right path. But as they got closer, they began to realize that the car was surrounded by tall grass and looked to be old and covered in rust. The taxi had to slow down to almost a crawl in order to pass to the left of the abandoned car without hitting it because of the little space left to pass through the narrow road. All of a sudden, the actor sitting on the right side of the car yelled to the others not to look and covered his eyes. The other actor and the driver, rattled by his yell, ducked down, covering their eyes. Something immediately began repeatedly slamming hard into the front right window of the car. Hearing this, they of course all abandoned the idea of shielding their eyes and immediately looked at the window to see what was hammering at it. There was a woman who had her upper body poking out of the rusty car through its broken window. She was drenched in blood and half of her face was gone. She angrily continued to beat the window with both of her fists and then began to try to open the door. The three men began to scream, and the driver slammed his foot down on the accelerator, getting away as fast as he could. Later, one of the actors asked the driver why he took that road in the first place, and the driver incredulously replied that one of them had told him to take the road. The actors told him that they had been sleeping until the car jarred them awake, to which the driver replied, "Then who told me to turn that way?" The driver was so scared that he spent the night on set with the crew just to not have to drive back alone. Now, I'm not going to tell you to believe these or not. That's up to you. But you have to admit that a forest with that much of its history surrounded by death, one where people even travel far distances to commit suicide in it to this day, and where you find personal belongings of those that have left this world scattered about like some eerie mementos of a life now extinct, is pretty creepy even without the ghost tales. And as crazy as it might sound, my little macabre heart would love to one day visit and not only bask in its beauty, but maybe also veer off of the path and into the darkness. I just hope that once there, I'll be able to find my way back out. That's it for today, but I want to make one last and very important note. If you or someone you know is going through depression or has suicidal thoughts, please seek out help. I know that it may seem hard or even pointless right now. It may even feel that it's impossible for things to get better, but eventually they do. Just take it one day at a time and know that you are not alone in the battle. A great place to start reaching out for help is the National Suicide Hotline. Their number is 1-800-273-8255 or 1-800-273-TALK. I'll also be adding it to both the comments and the description of the video in case someone needs to come back and get it at some point. Please, if you need it, don't hesitate to use it. See you next time.